On the surface, Ted is a 2012 comedy movie about growing up and becoming an adult. But look a little deeper and you'll find out you're watching something else entirely. And to understand what Ted is really about, we need to start by looking at the characters. So who are the main characters? If you think it's John and Ted, then you're wrong. The main characters are John and Laurie. Replace Ted the talking teddy bear with Ted the stoner who works at Wendy's and you have the exact same movie. In fact, you could take Ted out entirely and substitute video games and it doesn't change much. Just because the bear is talking doesn't make him a character. But if Ted's not a character, then what is he? The easy answer is that Ted is the manifestation of John's inner child, but that answer assumes that John has a side that isn't childish. Ted's not the manifestation of anything, he's a scapegoat for John and Laurie and a red herring for the audience. The thing you need to keep in mind when watching Ted is that the movie's not being honest with itself or with you. It wants you to think that John has finally cast off his childhood and can now live happily ever after, but that's not what happens. John gets rid of Ted, but Ted was never the problem. Ted's not the thing that tempts John away from spending time with his girlfriend. Ted is the excuse that John uses to stay away from his girlfriend. John got rid of the excuse, but he didn't address the issue that he'd rather sit around and smoke pot than be with Laurie. And to prove this, we just need to look at all the times we see John and Laurie together interacting with each other. It's only when they're doing relationship things like anniversary dinner or in bed. We never see them doing something fun together or just hanging out. The movie tells us that they love each other, but the question we should be asking is, do they even like each other? I would say the answer is a clear no, considering the fact that she hates everything he likes doing and eventually dumps him for doing the things he likes to do. When another character wants to know what Laurie sees in her boyfriend of 4 years, she says that he's the hottest guy in Boston and that they laugh a lot. Now those are reasons to go on a second date with someone, but they're not really reasons to get engaged. And to be clear, John doesn't like her either. When Ted brings a bunch of hookers home and one of them shits on the floor, John makes Laurie clean it up. When they go on a double date with Ted and some random bimbo, John sides with Ted and the bimbo instead of with Laurie. And finally, the one time we see him doing something for her, he eventually ditches her to go partying and completely forgets about her until she shows up pissed off and dumps him. Now after she dumps him, he decides he wants her back, so he jumps to the biggest cliche in romance, the grand gesture of love. When a character performs a grand gesture of love, it's all about affection and passion. It's a way for the protagonist to show the other character how much they really love them. It works well for a middle-aged guy in a passionless marriage. The problem there is that the relationship has lost its spark because it's all just routine, and the character can use the grand gesture to reignite that spark by breaking out of that routine. But the problem with John and Laurie's relationship is the exact opposite. The one thing that their relationship isn't lacking is passion and affection. They've got plenty of that. What they're lacking is routine. Laurie knows that John has the hots for her, and she tells us point blank that she has the hots for him. So him performing a grand gesture of love isn't the kind of move that fixes the actual problems that they have. She wants him to get to work on time and stop partying every night with his friend. Singing in front of a crowd doesn't build the kind of daily routine that Laurie is looking for, and it doesn't display the kind of adult dependability that John is lacking. But if it doesn't solve any of the problems that they have, why does it work? Why does Laurie take John back? And to get to the answer of that question, we need to ask a different one. Who is the first and only person Laurie dates after she dumps John? Her creepy, narcissistic boss. And of course, on that one date, he treats her like crap, confirming to her and convincing us that these are her only two options. She can either have the 35-year-old pothead or the creepy narcissist. She's so jaded that she would rather create a self-fulfilling prophecy than try to find a guy who might actually be compatible with her. Now, before anyone starts to feel too bad for Laurie, understand that she's just as much at fault for all this as John is. No one ever woke up 4 years into a relationship and suddenly realized that their partner was a loser. 6 months in, Laurie already knew that John was an immature stoner, and it was already a deal breaker for her then. The only difference is that 6 months into the relationship, she thought John might magically change, and 4 years later, she started to realize that he never will. And that makes it really intolerable, and so she gives him an ultimatum which he predictably fails immediately. Because what do we know about John? He was a lonely kid that got a best friend just by wishing for it to happen. Now look, a lonely kid getting a friend is a good thing, because having friends is part of how kids learn that they aren't the center of the universe. But John never had to learn those things because Ted doesn't have his own interests. He doesn't have his own desires that conflict with John's. He exists because John wished for him to exist, and he makes no demands on John other than the attention that John wants to give him anyway. Ted's love is completely unconditional. So of course John immediately fails when Laurie gives him an ultimatum, because he doesn't understand compromises. He doesn't understand sacrificing his own interests for other people. He doesn't understand that Laurie's love does come with some conditions, and that those conditions include thinking about someone other than himself. But again, don't fall into the trap of thinking that this is all John's fault, because while John doesn't understand all those things, Lori does. The movie goes to great lengths to show us that she's a normal adult, presumably with a normal childhood that included normal friends. If as an adult she's still not smart enough to read the writing on the wall, then it's no one's fault but hers. But this is a movie, and the director can yell cut whenever he wants, so instead of ending with a messy divorce, Ted ends with a happy wedding. And that's the biggest lie of all, because Ted is not a story about a talking teddy bear. Ted is a story about the relationships that millions of real 18 to 35-year-olds have with each other. And real life does not have a director who can decide to roll credits at the most convenient time with a hand wave about happily ever after. In real life, the happy wedding is followed by the next day, and the next month, and the next year. And two people who don't like each other but got married anyway have to somehow figure out how to live all those months and years. And if you want to know how well that works, go look at the divorce rates for first-time marriages among lower-income couples. There is a reason Ted made $500 million at the box office in 2012, and it's not because of the jokes or the CG teddy bear. It's because the audience saw their own life in this movie, but they also saw the promise that their life would end with a happy ever after. They went to see a movie that told them it was okay to keep living the way they were because the world would just magically make it all work out for them in the end. And for when it inevitably doesn't work out, the movie sold them one final comforting lie. Don't blame your partner, don't blame your own bad decisions, and definitely don't blame yourself. Blame the weed, blame the video games, blame the talking teddy bear. And then, once it all blows up in your face, do it all over again the exact same way.